The little grey alien stood before them both. It was telling them telepathically what to do. You must come to this address immediately. 5546 Hedgebury. Paul looked at his carer, Stephen, who stood there in disbelief. The grey alien retreated into the shadows, leaving them both in the bedroom. "Stephen," Paul said gently. Stephen still stood in shock, staring at the darkness where the alien had been. Paul, in his wheelchair, moved towards the side lamp, where a set of controls lay on the side table. He pressed a button and the overhead lights came on. "Stephen," he repeated. This time the young carer looked at him, his eyes wide, his mouth open. "Stephen, please listen to me. You need to get the car and take me to that address." Stephen just nodded. "Or ring me a taxi. Yes, that might be better. Ring me a taxi, Stephen." "Am I dreaming?" Stephen asked the old man as he helped him to the front door. Paul thought about lying to him, but decided against it. "No, Stephen, you've just met your first alien. Now go home and get some sleep." The taxi dropped Paul off at the house. The taxi driver helped him out of the car and into his wheelchair. "Bit late to be visiting someone, if you don't mind me saying," the driver said as he looked up at the house. There were no lights on, no signs of anybody at home. "Thanks for getting me here so fast." Paul paid him the fare, and as he began to wheel himself up the drive, another taxi pulled up next to his. The passenger was in his late 80s or early 90s, an old man like Paul. He nodded at Paul politely and waited till both taxis had driven off before he spoke. "Dr. Paul Carson, right?" "Yes. Do I know you?" "Yes, it was a long time ago. Tommy Lee." The man held out his hand to shake. Paul shook it as he tried to recall the name, but his mind was blank. "I was a security guard back in 47, Tommy Lee said, then indicated that maybe they should go to the house. Paul nodded with some recollection. "I assume you were summoned too," Tommy Lee said as he pushed Paul in his wheelchair up to the door. Paul nodded. "You were the youngest out of the doctors and professors, if I recall correctly," Tommy Lee was saying. Paul nodded. "There can't be many other of you guys still alive today. It was 70 years ago, right?" Paul said nothing. He knew all of his colleagues from that time had passed on. They both looked at the front door to the house. "Shall I knock?" Tommy asked. Paul shrugged. "Did you bring a gun?" "What for?" Tommy replied. "We both know they don't work on them." Paul asked another question. "Have you ever been here before?" "Nope, never been to this area. What about you?" "No, I didn't recognize the address at first, but now we are both here, I do." Tommy waited for the doctor to tell him, but Paul kept silent. Then a bright light came from above. It took over the whole house and driveway, so blinding they had to cover their eyes. There was a distant sound of whirling. Then the light went out as fast as it came. As Tommy regained his eyesight, he looked around the street to see if anybody else had seen the light. No curtains twitched, no front door opened by a nosy neighbour. The neighbourhood slept soundly. "Did you see it?" Paul asked him. "What?" Tommy asked. "The UFO." "No," Tommy replied. "It was too bright." Paul nodded. He knew it was a UFO, a flying saucer shape. He had witnessed them back in 1947. The sudden bright light, the distant sound, they appeared and disappeared in a blink of an eye. Tommy was anxious. "I wish I knew why we are here." As if to answer his question, the front door opened as if inviting them in. Paul's carer Stephen was home and unable to sleep. He was alert now, remembering what he could of the incident. The grey had appeared out of nowhere and spoken to them. Stephen shook his head. It had been scary. The grey alien hadn't used its mouth. It had spoken to him via thought. Stephen felt traumatized at this, as though his mind had been raped. He turned on the TV, but there were just old movies or repeats of game shows at this time of night, neither of which appealed to him. He had put on his computer and waiting for his social network profile to upload. In his status he wrote, "I've just encountered a grey alien." A few minutes later there was a comment from his friend Jose. "Anal probing?" "I'm serious," Stephen replied. Josie wrote back quickly, "First gay encounter?" Stephen felt he needed to explain more. "A grey alien came to my patient's room, just appeared out of nowhere, spoke to me via my mind." Jose, not taking this seriously, wrote, "Grey alien wants some old man action?" Stephen sighed. Nobody was going to believe him. Then, a minute later, somebody else wrote something. It was Helena. "Check this out. There are reports that there is an alien spacecraft attacking Groom Lake. That's known as Area 51, where they keep the crashed alien spacecraft." Stephen asked her where she got this evidence. He followed her links. They came from rogue news sites, ones not normally recognised in the big world of media. There was a short film from a mobile phone uploaded. It was a soldier filming a military base being attacked by a giant flying saucer-type aircraft. The UFO was shooting laser-type beams at the base, destroying it in seconds. The military had little time to retaliate before it was destroyed. Stephen couldn't believe it. He panicked and sent out "alien attacks" and "world about to end as aliens attack" blogs and comments to all his social feeds. Back at the house, the doctor and security guard had entered. They were escorted by two grey aliens into a kitchen area. It was a large kitchen with a table and chairs set in the centre. The blinds had been pulled down. The grey aliens pulled out the chairs, indicating for Tommy to sit, whilst Paul was wheeled up to sit next to him. Paul looked at Tommy. "You don't seem nervous." Tommy licked his lips. His mouth was dry, but he thought that was old age rather than nerves. "They scared me back in 47, but I'm an old man now. What can they do to me?" Paul nodded, admiring the bravery of the man. Paul himself was a little worried. Being a wheelchair user gave him a disadvantage should they have to run. Well, he couldn't. He wasn't scared of death, but he was scared of torture, and he knew these grey aliens were capable of that. The two greys standing there suddenly became alert. From the back room entered two more greys, escorting a tall, humanoid figure. The figure came and stood before them. It was obviously in charge. They couldn't see its face, as it wore a long oval grey mask, with no eye holes or any other features. Yet the creature inside seemed capable of seeing where it was walking, and to look at them. It was dressed in black and grey clothing, and had an impressive cape. The figure looked at them both as if studying them intensely, and then it spoke, a female voice dulled slightly by the mask, but still audible. "It has taken me many years to return, but now, finally, I come back." There was a silence. Paul felt it was waiting for them to say something. He decided to venture a question. "When did you last visit this planet?" The figure turned her head. Her full attention was him as she sneered, "When did I last visit this planet? I have never visited it before." "But you said that you have returned." Paul said, not quite understanding. She put her gloved hands up to her mask as if about to take it off, but decided to reply before she removed it. "I am from this planet." The removal of the mask revealed a human woman in her 40s, beautiful yet scarred. Her eyes were slits of anger. Tommy stared at her as Paul realised who she was. "Deborah Lytton," he said. "So you recognise me?" she sneered. "It's been 70 years. You should be in your 80s by now, but you don't look a day over 40, he said as he scrutinised her. "Lack of gravity stops one aging," she told him. This planet Earth ages people much faster than other planets or space itself. Who? Tommy seemed unable to finish the question, probably because he knew the answer. Paul explained briefly. She's one of the children. Oh my God, was Tommy's reply. Paul continued. This was your family house, wasn't it, Deborah? I thought I recognised the address. Deborah Lytton mimicked Paul. You say it so casually. She's one of the kids, one of the 12 kids that you and your friends gave to them. Paul looked humbled. I'm sorry. Deborah slammed her hand down onto the table. Sorry? Sorry, really? Paul shut up. What could he say? He had been part of that awful experiment, something that had sat on his conscience for the rest of his life. He knew for a fact that what he and his colleagues had done was wrong, heinously wrong. If he had a time machine, he would go back and change it. Deborah Lytton reminded him of it. You chose 12 of us, 12 children selected to be your bartering tools. You exchanged 12 of us for one of them. 12 of us for one of them. The numbers don't seem to match. How come they received 12 of us and you only got one of them? Paul swallowed. His mind wanted to think but couldn't. His heart was pounding and his throat was dry. He seemed unable to speak. She looked like she was going to kill him. Tommy replied for him. They didn't know what they were doing. She turned her attention on Tommy. No, they didn't know, did they? They had no idea as to what was going to happen to any of us. No idea. Yet they were then happy to send us off, as if we were on some kind of a European exchange holiday. She stared at both the men for a moment, then asked, What happened to the one they gave you, the alien? Paul was reluctant to speak. Tommy said he didn't know. He was never assigned to any more alien-type encounters. You know, she said, pointing at Paul, what happened to the grey alien they gave you in exchange? Did you care for it? Paul remained silent. Did you feed it, play with it, prod it, probe it, cut it open? Paul stared at the table as he recalled what they had done to the grey alien they had been given. Tell me, she almost screamed. We looked at it. We put it through tests. It took a while for us to realise it was not organic. Deborah Lytton laughed. No, they are not organic. They are non-organic. They are machines, each one the same as the other. They do not feel, they do not eat, they do not shit, they do not act like us. Is that what you discovered? Paul nodded. Tommy gasped as Deborah Lytton carried on. You gave them, these robotic-type creatures, 12 children for them to do as they will. Do you think they cared for us? Do you think they played with us? Do you think they are as inquisitive as us humans? Neither man answered, so she answered for them. Of course they are. They wanted to know all about us, how we were made, what we could feel, what we liked, what we hated. What they did to us you could never imagine in a million years. They didn't play happy families, let me tell you that. I'm so sorry, Tommy said. I wish I could have done something, but I was just a security guard. Where was your conscience? Deborah Lytton interrupted. I was just a security guard. A security guard keeps everything secure. You did not keep things secure. You allowed them, she pointed again at Paul, to take 12 children from their homes and gave them away to an alien race. Tommy began to weep. It is something I've never forgotten. I was just following orders. The woman tutted. Following orders is such a poor excuse. Paul watched her. She was thin but tall. Her hair was matted, but she seemed healthy, if a little psycho, but who wouldn't be after what she had been through? He ventured a question. What happened to the other 11 children? Deborah took in a breath before answering. The other 11 were as frightened as I was, terrified by the aliens. We wanted our parents, our siblings. We all tried to be brave. We all wanted to go home. But not everybody survived the torture they put us through. She went quiet. Paul needed to know. How many of you survived? There are only 3 of us still alive. Where are the other 2? I helped them escape and have found them a safer world to live upon. They did not want to come back here. Why should they? They were abandoned. They were outsiders. They were alone. They no longer fit into this world. We always hoped that you would come back, Deborah. Deborah chuckled. Yes, I can imagine you all looking up to the stars, waiting for our great return from our little space adventure. What did you tell our parents? Do they know the truth? Paul did not reply. Did you lie about what happened to us? Paul reluctantly replied to that. Most of you were reported as missing or involved in fatal accidents. Tommy gasped again. You lied to their parents? What parent would allow their kid to be taken by us and given to an alien race? Paul almost shouted at Tommy. I knew our government was bad, Tommy muttered. Deborah Lytton tutted. Can't trust anyone. Can't trust humans. Can't trust them. She nodded over at the grey aliens who stood in the room with them. You can't trust them either. What do you want with us? Paul asked her. I want revenge, she said. I want you to know what you did to me. I've destroyed the laboratory you sent me from. One of the Greys turned on the kitchen TV and retuned it so that it could be programmed to show them the carnage from the flying saucer's perspective of destroying Area 51. They watched as Deborah Lytton ordered the Greys to fire down upon the military base. They watched as the area was annihilated in under a minute with some kind of laser technology. You have a spaceship? Paul was amazed. How do you think I got away from their planet? You stole one of their ships? Tommy asked. Sort of. I managed to adapt some of the grey aliens to my way of thinking. They can be easily manipulated if you offer them a new way of life. They live like clones, so all are the same. I offer them their individuality for their help to escape this planet. Paul stared at the aliens. He made them go rogue. Yes. And now? Once I've exacted my revenge upon you, I shall take over the planet, I suppose. Neither of the men knew what to say. Both felt guilty for what they had done to this little girl and wanted to make amends, but how? How does one rehabilitate somebody who was originally sent away, and sent away without having committed a crime, sent away for no reason other than for scientific research? What they did to you was heinous. What we did to you was heinous, Paul began, wondering if he could talk her out of whatever crazy plan she had next. No one can deny that. Let the world know your story. Let the world know what awful things we did to you, and I promise you humanity will rise up and look after you, welcome you back with open arms, and will want to make things right for you. Really? Deborah Lytton said, not quite believing him. You don't think they would think me mad? How many people would believe my story? You have a spaceship and grey aliens to prove it, Tommy quickly said. Humanity does not care for me, she said. I know that if they did, you would have sent a rescue party to find me and the 11 others. Paul interrupted. We did not have the technology. These grey aliens were far superior in technology to us. Yes, I know, they used to tell us this. They told us all if we did not do as they said, we would be responsible for them coming and destroying the planet Earth, that they would kill our families and everybody else. We were kids, and so afraid, but we knew we had to protect our families. We knew we had to protect the people of this planet, so we did as they asked. We did everything to stop them coming to destroy you. Tommy burst out crying, emotionally strained. He wept and wept. Deborah Lytton stared at him. We all cried up there, but never in front of the aliens. Only with each other, away from their prying eyes. We never let them know they were breaking us. Those poor kids, Tommy sobbed. Paul didn't know what to do. He wanted to hear about everything that had happened to her, yet a part of him was afraid to hear it. If it was all as bad as she was making out, then he was responsible for what had happened to her. I can't change the past, he finally said, but I can make your future better. I can help you back here on Earth. She glared at him. I don't want to be here back on Earth. What do you want? He asked. Revenge, so you've told us. You are going to kill us and the human race. You're as bad as the aliens that took you. A human is capable of compassion and forgiveness. A human is capable of these things. That is how we survive. Compassion and forgiveness did not work for us with them. She pointed at the grey aliens. No, that is true. Your need to escape, to survive, your will to live kept you alive until you found a way out, Paul reminded her. Your need to break out was stronger than your desire for defeat, and because of that you are here today. You were able to make these grey aliens change their ways. You made them see they are individuals and not part of a collective. You gave them the right to be alive and free. As humans should be, she interrupted him. I see where you are going with this, but I need to... She never finished her sentence. There was a repeat of the bright light that they had seen before. The whirling noise of a flying saucer was coming from outside. Deborah Lytton's alien suddenly took a stance of urgency. Deborah Lytton looked concerned. The back door that led to the garden opened, and in walked a tall, grey, reptilian-type creature, dressed in a red suit. He was escorted by 4 grey aliens. Deborah Lytton backed away from him as he walked towards her, ignoring the 2 frightened men at the table. Deborah Lytton, you must return, the reptilian said. He reached out a hand to her, and she rejected it. I'm not coming back with you, she yelled. You cannot stay here, the reptilian reminded her. Why not? This is my home world. The reptilian stood before her and agreed with her. It is your world, and you can remain here, but they, he pointed to the grey aliens, and the ship returns with me. No, I have fought for their freedom, she began to protest, but the reptilian ignored her and strode back out of the room with all of the grey aliens. She ran after them into the garden, leaving the 2 men in the kitchen. What the... Tommy was unsure what to say or do. Paul prodded him. Get me out of here. Tommy jumped to his feet and started pushing the wheelchair back through the hallway to the front door. He managed to get the door open with trembling hands and get them both out onto the street. The bright light still rained down upon the house. They could see now the silhouette of 2 flying saucer-shaped spacecraft above it. Suddenly the lights went out and both ships headed up into the night sky. The 2 men were alone in the street. The whole neighbourhood seemed to be sleeping soundly, unaware as to what was going on. The 2 quickly made their way out of the area, constantly looking back, checking nobody, human or alien, was following them. They found a taxi rank and went their separate ways.